Welcome to Web of Tomorrow, a show about the web and the people who build it. I'm Adam Garrett Harris, and this time my guest is Cassidy Williams. Cassidy is currently the head of developer voice programs at Amazon, and we're going to talk about mechanical keyboards. So welcome to the show.
Thank you for having me. I'm excited.
Yeah, so I've been following you on Twitter for a while, and I saw you tweet this thing that said, me in real life talking about mechanical keyboards. And there's like three different responses or three different types of people. Someone that didn't even ask, someone that now regrets asking, and someone you don't even know.
Sounds fun.
And so I was like, I want to hear what you have to say about mechanical keyboards.
Well, good. That makes one person.
So I want to hear a little bit about your background first before we get into keyboards, though.
Sure.
How did you get into coding quickly, and then just kind of your career history, how you ended up at Amazon?
Sure. Yeah. So getting into coding was a very random occurrence, and people who know me have heard this story many, many times. But I was walking home from school in 8th grade, and I heard someone say, check out my website. And I was like, oh, you can have one of those? And so I went home and started looking up how to make a website. And that's how it all began. And eventually I kept learning how to make websites. And this was way back like IE6 days. I remember specifically when Internet Explorer 7 came out and like transparent PNGs were suddenly a thing. It was amazing. Yeah, I ended up taking AP Computer Science when I was in high school, and that kind of sealed the deal that I wanted to pursue coding in some way, and majored in computer science at Iowa State University. And while there, I did all kinds of great things. I loved going to Iowa State, and we had a computer science club that I ended up leading by my senior year, and I did a few different internships, both on campus and far away from campus, in Minneapolis and Seattle and the Bay Area. And I also ended up studying abroad in Spain as well. So all kinds of great adventures while at Iowa State. And after school, I worked at Venmo, and I was doing both software engineering and developer evangelism there. I really liked the idea of coding, but also being able to kind of test my speaking chops and doing just more than coding. And so that's how I got into dev evangelism.
I heard that when you took the job at Venmo, you actually turned down some really awesome jobs.
I did. It was such a tough decision. I actually have this like journal that I write in. I try to write in every single day. It emails me and I reply back, and that's an entry. And looking back on the entries that I made around that time, I was so stressed. My senior year, I kind of just mass applied for a lot of jobs. A lot of people, because I ended up having 10 job offers before graduation, and a lot of people are just like, wow, oh, you must really know what you're doing. But what they don't realize is how many jobs I applied for. Like, if you apply for tons and tons of things, chances are you're going to get something. So that's kind of how that ended up. But yeah, I turned down a lot of big companies like the Googles and the Apples and Intel and stuff, and a few smaller companies too. Back when SendGrid was really small, I ended up not going with them, and some other just not straight technical companies like AT&T and Thomson Reuters and General Mills. And it was tough because I really did like a lot of those companies, but Venmo offering me both the software engineering and developer evangelism role was really exciting. And I was able to move to New York City, and I had never lived in New York before, so I was really excited to try that out.
Oh, cool.
Yeah, and so with Venmo, I was there for a little over a year, and I was really loving it. We made music videos in the office. The culture was awesome. I loved just showing off the Venmo API to a bunch of developers. And then Clarify came along, and Clarify is an AI startup in New York City, although they're a little bigger now. But they started reaching out to me, and at this point I was like, no, I'm not really interested. I'm going to stay put. I don't want to just stay at a company for only a year. My mindset was very different then. And when I started talking with the founder, it kind of turned into an interview to the point where he was just like, oh, we should do technical questions. I said, oh, this was just supposed to be a coffee chat. No. And so I ran away, almost literally. And then my sister ended up actually getting a job offer from Clarified like later that week, and she said, "Okay, you have to try checking them out now, especially if I'm working there." And she was right. So I went back and did a quick technical interview, and I got the offer and was very nervous. And I made this giant pros and cons list of deciding, should I leave Venmo, should I go to Clarify, what should I do? And ultimately I decided to go to Clarify, which ended up being a great decision. I'm still friends with people over at Venmo, but Clarify was a very new and exciting opportunity. I was the 17th employee in the door, and so it was very, very young and early, and it was fun getting to see a startup just so early on, really starting to pick up its pace. And as I was at Clarify, I was really enjoying it, but I was kind of starting to get a little tired of New York City. And so after a little over a year at Clarify 2, I ended up telling my then boyfriend, now husband, that I wanted to check out a new city. And we decided on Seattle. He ended up at Amazon, and I ended up at a creative agency in the city called L4 Digital. And at L4, I loved it there. It was a super fun company. I was a senior software engineer there, and I managed a few developers there as well. And I really started to spread the word of mechanical keyboards once I moved to Seattle. When I was in New York, I was so bogged down with work all the time that I didn't really have very much time to play with keyboards and kind of explore it as a hobby. I was more just like a lurker on the outside. But once I moved to Seattle, I dove in deep. And there's quite a contingent here for mechanical keyboard enthusiasts, which normalizes me, and I'm very happy about.
Nice.
Yeah, we have mechanical keyboard meetups here. I'm speaking at the next one this July. We have like build parties and a Slack group that's super active where we just talk about keyboards all day, all the time. And it's great. And so I've got plugged in with a few different communities. I'm in the Seattle Video Game Orchestra out here, and I play trumpet to Mario music and Zelda and Skyrim and stuff around the city with the group. Anyway, the kind of a side note, but I really have enjoyed moving to Seattle just because I've been able to pursue hobbies a lot more. And L4 was bought, and I wasn't a huge fan of some of the company changes that were happening, and my sister had recently moved to Amazon, and my husband was starting to lure me over saying, "Come check us out, we're cool." And it worked. And so I actually got married this past November, and then ended up interviewing with Amazon like a month later. And those are the major life changes that have happened in the past year. And now I'm at Amazon doing a bunch of different Alexa work, both in JavaScript and on the evangelism type side of things, and still doing a lot of keyboard stuff too.
Cool. So you're a developer as well as doing other stuff.
Yeah, I have a very weird job at Amazon. It's hard to describe in a sentence.
Yeah. Okay, so you said you were kind of a lurker in the mechanical keyboard world in New York?
Yes.
So what was your first introduction to them?
So the website Massdrop was my first introduction to them. And Massdrop, they do group buys where they have like these niche communities where people can say, "Oh, I really like this particular type of watch, but nobody else in the world does." And all of these different people in the world come together and do a group buy. And so the more people buy in on a given product of some sort, the cheaper it gets, because that buy goes straight to the manufacturer. And I thought it was such a cool concept, and I discovered it somehow, like on Facebook or something. And then I started getting the newsletters and started checking out the really customizable keyboards that Massdrop had. And I was like, ooh, I like this whole custom thing, because who doesn't want a cool desk at home? And that's where I first got introduced to it. And then I discovered the subreddit on Reddit, which is a deep dive too. And so between Massdrop and the subreddit, that's where I first really just started like looking at all of the options for mechanical keyboards and seeing the differences between them. And I also had a coworker at Clarify where he's very involved in the community, and he actually was helping run mechanical keyboard meetups in New York City, which I didn't know existed until, of course, I was almost leaving the city. But he helps me kind of get plugged into to figure out which keyboards I should buy first and stuff. And yeah, once I moved here, never looked back.
Nice. What was your first keyboard that you got?
This is actually my first keyboard, if you can hear it. It's a super clicky keyboard. This is actually the first keyboard I built. I had two keyboards to start. One was a WASD keyboard, WASD is the brand, and it lets you customize the colors of a keyboard, and then they'll ship it to you all customized, and it's awesome. And I loved having that one for start, and it isn't as loud and clicky as this one right here. And that one I have somewhere in my house. And this next keyboard that I've been clicking along is the first keyboard that I built, and it's a Centrac 60% keyboard. And the switches are Gatoron greens, which means they're kind of like heavier clicky switches, and then the keycaps are called DSA Overcast. And so DSA is the profile of keycaps, so they're short and straight across, and then an Overcast is like the color scheme, and so I have the orange and white color scheme with a little hint of green in there.
Okay, cool. I think it'd be cool to go over some of the vocabulary of keyboards, because there was a lot. There was a lot there.
A lot of words, probably.
Well, okay. What was the name of the first keyboard again?
Okay, so I'll start from the beginning, and I'll talk about the sizing. And so a typical keyboard that has like all the letters, all the numbers, a numpad on the side, arrow keys, everything, that's a 100% keyboard. And that one, it has about 104 keys depending on your layout and everything, but that's considered a 100% keyboard. If you cut out the numpad, then that's called a TKL, aka tenkeyless, because those 10 keys of the numbers are cut off. And a TKL is also known as a 75 or 80% keyboard because you're cutting off that many keys, because that includes the plus sign and the minus and the times.
Okay. Is there a difference between 75, 80%?
It depends on the keys. It's hard to explain, but it kind of depends on if you have a function row at the top, I guess.
Oh, yeah. Okay.
And then the next size down is a 68%, 67 or 68%, and I actually have one of those here too. And this one is called a clue board, and that one still has arrow keys, but it takes out the entire top row of function keys, and it only has a couple more function keys on top of the arrow keys. And I just have page up and page down. Some people have delete and insert. It's kind of up to you.
Okay.
And it keeps going down. And so after the between 65 and 68, again, depending on the number of keys, you have the 60%, and that cuts off the arrow keys. So you have no function keys, no arrow keys, but with those, that's where you start to get really creative with how you program it. And that's what I really like about the smaller keyboards is your hands don't have to move as far across the board. Whenever I use a really small keyboard, I end up using a big one later and thinking, oh, I have to move my hand all the way over here to reach an arrow key. But meanwhile, with this one, I'll hit function and then use HKJL for my arrow keys. Some people use like the menu key and do the WASD for their arrow keys. And so it's up to you. And you can stick in as many functions and layers of functions as you want, which is really fun.
Yeah, we'll have to talk about layers more in depth.
Yeah, I will. And then after 60%, it keeps getting smaller. There's 40% keyboards. I don't actually have one on me right now, but 40% keyboards have much less keys. It doesn't have a number row. It just has the letters and then some function keys on the outside, and the space bar is much shorter. And then the smallest keyboard I've seen someone reasonably use is a 30% keyboard, which just cuts out even more keys. So it's a lot more about like the creative programming of how you understand your functions on the different layers, and saying like, okay, if I hit these two keys, the Q turns into a 1, and like happy.
Yeah. What I think is really interesting about that is a lot of people who are into mechanical keyboards are developers, and developers need a lot of those extra keys and symbols. Yeah. I think if you're just typing normal sentences, a 30% would probably be fine.
Yeah.
Well, no, people still need...
So I've had 40% keyboards, and I also have some orthogonal keyboards, and that's when, like, when you look at your keyboard now, it's staggered, and so all of the letters aren't exactly one right on top of the other, but orthogonal layout is when it's a straight grid. That's the smallest keyboard I have, and that is a struggle to get used to, and I can't code on it. The smallest keyboard that I can code on reasonably is the 60%, because I still have a reasonable amount of symbols. It's just the arrow keys that I don't have, and honestly, I program in Vim anyway, so I use HKJL pretty seamlessly.
Yeah.
But yeah, if I'm writing like a blog post or an essay or something, using those small keyboards actually is great because you move really fast because your hands just aren't going anywhere, but it definitely takes some getting used to. I tried coding with a 40% once, and I couldn't take it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I have an Ergodox. I'm not sure what percentage that is.
So that one, people don't really classify the Ergodox as a percentage because it kind of still has a lot of the same keys that you need. It's just spread out differently. Those are usually just docs keyboards, and there's such things as like the Orthodox, which is an orthogonal keyboard. Again, it's got the grid, but then it's got a couple thumb keys, so your hands are spread out. And there's the Iris, which is like a smaller version of the Ergodox. And so it's those kind of live in their own separate families.
Okay. So those are all, split keyboards, right? They're orthogonal. And then I guess the weird thing is they have keys underneath your thumb.
Right. Yeah. It's a lot more thumb action and I guess less pinky action or whatever you might use. And you also are more forced to like keep your hands in a natural position, where I myself, like, I can touch type, but it's not the proper way, and I kind of dive across the keyboard depending on what I'm typing.
Oh, right. Yeah. When I first switched to an Ergodox, because it's split, I didn't really have problems with this, but some people noticed that they can't use their left hand for the wrong keys on the right side.
Exactly. Like I tend to just let my index fingers kind of dive across depending on what I'm typing all the time, and I am not good at using split keyboards for that reason because I tend to hunt and peck. I like the more standard shape because then I can just type quickly without having to look down all the time.
Yeah, I love just being able to spread my shoulders apart, bring my shoulders back.
Yeah, that's true. I recently laser cut a case for an Iris keyboard, which again is like a smaller Ergodox, and so I'm going to see if I can just like put both hands on armrests or something and see how that might feel, but it's a project. Wow. We'll see.
Okay, so we've got the different sizes of keyboards. What other kind of terminology is there?
So now that you've got the sizes down, next are the switches. And switches are the main thing that makes a mechanical keyboard mechanical because other keyboards, they're usually known as membrane keyboards. There's other ones like on Macs, they have those butterfly switches and stuff. Those types of keyboards that are non-mechanical are mostly reliant on you just kind of pressing a key into some kind of electronic thing that detects it, and that's it. But with a mechanical switch, it's an actual mechanism inside a little container that moves up and down, and that is the trigger, and that's the thing that it makes a keyboard mechanical. And there's 3 types of switches. There's tons of switches out there. Like I can't actually tell you how many there are, but they all generally fall under these 3 categories, which is clicky, tactile, or linear. And so clicky are, I kind of played it before. They're very loud. They're kind of what people expect to hear when they hear a mechanical keyboard. And tactile, it sounds more like this. And so it's a similar like sound, but it's not as loud. And then linear, I don't have a linear board right here with me, but linear, it's just smooth all the way up and down, and those ones tend to be the quietest. I really like the feeling of tactile switches, and clicky and tactile kind of go hand in hand because you get that bump, but clicky adds the sound. Generally, with these 3 categories, the most common switches are red, brown, and blue, where red switches are linear and they're actually red, and that's how people can tell the difference between them. So linear are red switches, and they are just, again, up and down. There's no bump or anything. It's just smooth sailing. Brown switches are the tactile ones, which are the tactile ones that I kind of played for you here. And those ones are bumpy, where as you feel them, it's like kind of satisfying to get that bump. And then the clicky ones, which are blues, those ones are loud. They're tactile like browns, but they're much louder, and they have like a whole separate little aspect of it that like smacks and makes the loud noise in there. And
so even if you're trying to type quietly, you can't.
You can't type quietly with blue switches. Yeah, and again, those are the different categories, but man, there's so many different kinds of switches. Some people like lube their switches so they're extra smooth. Some people add what are called O-rings, which you like wrap the stem with this little rubber band of sorts, so that way it's like got a cushion, and so it's not loud as much.
So that kind of would prevent you from bottoming out and making like an extra noise that's not actually the switch, I guess? It's actually just like the keycap hitting the bottom?
Right, exactly. Okay. There's also just different levels of force that you have to push down. Usually, I think across red, brown, and blue, those switches are like 55 Gs of force or something. But then there's more custom switches or more rare switches. So other switches are clear switches, which are like browns but heavier. And those are like 70 Gs or something like that when you go down, and so they're still tactile, they're just heavier, and that's satisfying for some people, exhausting for other people.
Yeah, so my first keyboard was a DOS keyboard with browns.
Yeah,
and then I got the Ergodox with clears, and yes, it was exhausting at first. Like my hand, I don't know, it's weird, but it felt like my hands were tired.
Right, your hands do get tired, but then after a while, you're kind of just like, ooh, I am pushing these words out physically. So it's satisfying when you get used to it, but you definitely have to have like some kind of finger muscle for it. And green switches are just like blues, except they're heavy, like clears. And so they're loud and clicky, but a little heavier. Those are just Cherry, the brand Cherry. There's so many other switches out there. There was actually at a meetup last year, they had a typing test, but the switches had over like 240 Gs of force. So it was like you had to like put your hand into it to get the keys down, and it was a typing test. It was impossible. I couldn't do it, but
I bet especially with your pinky.
Yeah, exactly. Pushing that hard down with a pinky was crazy, and it was just like there's no point, but some people just love seeing how heavy they can do it. They have little biceps in their fingers, I guess. The heaviest switches I have, they're called box Royal Navies. Or not Royal Navies. Royal Navies is a separate kind of switch. But anyway, box Navy switches, and those ones are, I think, 90 Gs. Those are heavy. Like, I like typing with them because, again, it's satisfying, but if I type in them for too long, my hands just get tired, and I get crammed a little bit.
You need to get the hand exercise thing.
Yeah.
Work up to it.
Yeah, I actually used one recently, and I was just like, oh, this actually is genuinely helpful. I need to do that. Yeah. So those are kind of the range of switches. I would not suggest for anyone to go above 90 Gs unless you're just trying to show off. Normally, the standard Cherry switches are great, but there's some really fun custom switches out there. My favorite custom switches are Zelio's switches. And those are purple. So first of all, fun color, but they are heavy like clears, but they are much more tactile. And so the bump is like much more accentuated, and it's just really, really fun to type on those ones without having to be crazy heavy for the bump.
Okay.
Yeah.
Cool. Anything else about switches?
I think that's it for switches. And so now we can get into keycaps. So keycaps come in various profiles, and the profiles just is a fancy word for shape. And so the shortest and kind of most standard, not even most standard, but standard across the board is DSA, where every single key is the exact same height straight across. They are square. They are very simply made keycaps. They're great because they're kind of spacey, I guess, for lack of a better phrase. They look futuristic compared with other keycaps. But yeah, DSA is a great shape, and again, it's short, and so your fingers don't have to stretch too high. And yeah, they're really fun to work with. The other shape is SA. So DSA is short, SA is tall. And I don't actually have an SA keyboard right next to me right now, but they're probably double the height of DSA keycaps. They're much higher, and they are really cool looking. I would say some of the coolest keyboards I've seen have been with SA keycaps, because those are the same shape as keycaps used in like the 70s that NASA used. And there's only one company that still makes the traditional SA keycaps, and they're based like somewhere in northern Washington, and they have the same molds that were used for those keycaps from like the 70s. And they're beautiful keycaps, but it is a low supply and high demand effort to get those kinds of keycaps, because they look really cool, but again, they're hard to find. And yeah.
Is there just like a waiting list for them?
There actually is. There's this one keycap set that I remember it was one of the first things that drew me in to mechanical keyboards, and I was just like, oh, where can I buy these? And people just laughed. And I was like, what do you mean? And it turns out like the only way to get those particular colors and types of those SA keycaps for this particular set that I wanted was through a random group buy on this one forum, and the waiting list was like 3.5 years. And yeah, wow. And I was just like, I don't even know where I'm gonna live. I don't know where my life is gonna be in 3.5 years. So I don't have that set yet. There's a lot of like aftermarket keycaps on Reddit and eBay and stuff where people will sell their keycaps, and that's where I get a lot of mine. Otherwise, just jumping in on group buys on Massdrop and some Reddit ones have been the best ways to kind of get fun keycaps. And not all of them have a waiting list of like 3.5 years, but a year is kind of reasonable for SA keycaps. SA keycaps are super rare, but super pretty. And then the other shapes / brands are DCS, DCS and GMK, and it's a lot of letters. DCS is made by Signature Plastics, which is the company that makes SA, and then GMK is a German company that makes it in generally the same profile, and those look a lot more like standard keycaps. Like if you go to an airport or I don't know, some business with a cash register, they will likely have those kinds of shapes where it's like curved at the top, the letters in the upper left-hand corner of the keycap. Those kinds of standard looking caps, and that's what DCS or GMK are. And those ones are becoming more and more customizable. GMK has some really cool sets out there. I only have one keyboard with those on there, and they're very classy looking because they're kind of old school, because they're a very common shape, but they're kind of everywhere. And so those are kind of the most common shapes of keycaps. And there's one other new shape that I really like, and it's newer, and it's called XDA. And it's similar to DSA in that it's kind of short and it's kind of standard across the board, but it's got a wider face for legends. And I actually designed a Scrabble Keycap set, which we can talk more about later, but that's going to be an XDA set where each of the keycaps looks like a Scrabble piece, where it has like the Q with the 10 in the bottom right hand corner and stuff. And that's the plan for that keycap set, but that's XDA. So
you said it has a wider what?
It's like a wider face. So like with DSA, you have, I don't know, that's maybe like a centimeter around to put the actual legends on the keycap. But with XDA, it's bigger, where like the cap is still the same size and won't like run into the other ones, but the actual top of the cap is probably like a centimeter plus a few millimeters or something, and it doesn't make that much of a difference, but there's some really fun sets that have come out of that shape.
So when you say legend, that's what's printed on the key?
Yes. So legend is what's printed on the key, and there's actually two types of legends. So now that we've talked about keycap profiles, I can talk about the legends.
And let me
Sure.
Clarify on profile. You said it's the shape, but is it just kind of the shape? It's not the size of it, right? It's not like the shift
Oh
key.
no. It's like the actual shape of the plastic. So like a shift key can be DSA, and so can a Q key. Yeah.
Okay.
And in terms of these keycaps, they are often printed in two ways. There's either die sub, or die sublimated, or double shot. And so die sublimated is printing the legend onto the keycap, which is pretty standard in what you expect you printed on there. Double shot, it means that it's actually a separate shot of plastic, where the underbelly of the keycap is one shot of plastic that's the same as the legend color, and then the cap is printed on top of it. And so when you actually look at a double shot keycap on different sides, it's different colors, and that's because the legend and the key itself are separate pieces of plastic. And what's cool about double shot is you can use that for decades and decades, and the legend will never wear off because it's not printed on there. It's a separate shot of plastic.
Oh, nice. Are there like some vintage double shot keycaps?
Yes, there's some cool ones, and that again, I would look up SA keycaps. Those are really cool. Almost all DSA ones tend to be double shot too. You can tell when something is printed or not, pretty much. A double shot keycap, that legend stays crisp forever, and it's awesome. And I mean, to be fair, I have several die sublimated sets, and none of them have started to fade away on me yet. And so it's fine, and it's designed to last a really long time. But the double shot plastic will last for many, many years to come.
As long as the keycap lasts, right? Unless you wear through it completely, right?
Yeah, and at that point, kudos. That's hard to do.
Yeah. What are there some that have a clear legend so that light can shine through?
Yeah, there's actually this one set, and it's made by that Signature Plastics company. They have a website called Pimp My Keyboard where you can get different keycap sets that they've made. And they have one called DSA Borealis. And so it's a DSA profile, and the color scheme is a kind of a gradient from purple to turquoise. And all of the legends are slightly transparent and glow in the dark, which are really cool. So it's glow in the dark plastic that is slightly transparent. And so if you have light coming through, like if you have LEDs underneath your keycaps, it can shine through that way. There's some really cool.
Is the legend from bottom to top or across the face of the cap?
So the legend is just the.
Oh, sorry, I said that wrong. Is the gradient from bottom to top?
Yeah, it's from bottom to top. So like the space bar is purple and like the number row is turquoise.
Oh, okay. It's across the face of the keys.
The entire keyboard is.
And so you have to have like a different gradient for each row.
Yeah.
Nice.
Yeah, it's pretty cool. Actually, one second. I have one right over here. This one is actually, it has linear switches. And so there's no major clicking except for when it touches the bottom. And it has SA keycaps, so they're much taller. I can show the kind of height difference there.
Yeah.
And it has this gradient from like white to black up to the top.
Nice.
Yeah. And again.
Okay, so it's not really a gradient. Each row is just a slightly different color.
Yeah, and so it's like a gradient across the board, not really on the cap itself. Although there are.
What is that? What is that? Escape key? Is that a spinner?
Yeah, it's
a fidget spinner.
A fidget spinner keycap.
That's amazing.
It's a dream. I love that keycap.
Does that annoy you at all in Vim when you're hitting escape?
No, it's actually kind of fun. It makes me feel like I'm accomplishing something in addition to code. That's a fun keyboard to bring to hackathons because people are like, first of all, what is that keyboard? Second of all, what is that keycap? Mm-hmm. It's definitely fun. But yeah, and another thing that you might come across when you're looking at keyboards, sometimes when you're getting keycaps, they'll say, okay, there's the base kit, or you can buy just the alphas or just the mods. Alphas are like the alphabet, and so it's all the letters plus the number row. And then mods are modifiers, so that's like Shift, Enter, Control, Alt, all of those different things. And then there's like the numpad and novelties, and novelties tend to be ones that have kind of fun legends that are different shapes. Like I have a novelty sailing key on this keyboard I have here, and so there's all kinds of different terminology in there, and I think I covered most of it between the switches, the keycaps, and the case and the keyboard size.
See, there also is there's some keycaps that are blank, right?
Yes, those are just blank keycaps.
Just blank.
Yeah, you can call them.
Yeah, I got the blank DOS keyboard when I got
Nice.
that, just to
Test yourself.
I guess like I don't look anyway, but I thought it looked cool that there were no letters on it.
Yeah, I like the idea of that, but then every time I've done it, I end up getting frustrated if I like hit a key wrong, and then I'm just like, no, this is right. And then I realize it's not, and I can't actually like look down at the keyboard and tell that to myself. And so I tend to use the printed ones, but kudos for using the blank ones. My husband actually has a blank DOS keyboard with blue switches downstairs.
Nice.
Yeah.
Oh, what about the little nub on the home row? The two keys on the home row.
Yeah, so those are homing keys, aptly named. And it definitely depends on the keyboard profile, how the homing keys look. Because on SA and DSA, they're actually just a deeper scoop, and it's kind of hard to show it on there, but it's just a deeper scoop in the cap than the other keys. And then with GMK, which again is like DCS, the more standard ones, they come with both the bump on the keys, kind of like your laptop keyboard, as well as more deeply scooped ones, and you can kind of choose between them which ones you...
Okay. Yeah, that's actually one of the problems I had with the Ergodox, is there were no homing keys.
Oh.
And I just temporarily swapped it out with the keys for my Ergodox. From my DOS keyboard. I swapped those. Yeah. And so one's smoother and one has a texture. Well, I guess, is that another thing that has some terminology, is the texture?
So usually that depends on the keycap maker. Because some keycaps are smooth and some are just not, and some keycap makers have different opinions on that. And so, for example, for Signature Plastics, the one who make SA keycaps, these keycaps that I have here on this SA grade, they are, first of all, dye sublimated, so it's not a separate shot of plastic for each of these, but they're also very smooth. And that's just the molds that they have for them. And usually SA keycaps are made of ABS plastic. A lot of people don't know the differences between the different plastics unless you're in 3D printing or something. But the ABS plastic is very, very smooth, and it can get shiny over time. PBT plastic is plastic that doesn't get as shiny over time when you use it. That's why a lot of people like PBT plastic, and that's what DSA keycaps are typically made from. And it really depends on the company what they use. Like SA grade, they actually recently came out with the PBT plastic SA keycaps, and it's up to the maker. GMK uses only ABS. There are different types of plastics, and those just result in again different texture, different like reactions to hand oils, and I'm sure they last differently too. I think they have different melting points, which doesn't matter unless you are making Artisan keycaps, which is another thing that people do. Like there's a whole contingent in the mechanical keyboard world of people who like make these tiny little sculptures onto keycaps and then sell them for enormous amounts of money. They make such great keycaps that they will make it in clay and then make a mold for it and then inject resin and then have this keycap that anybody can stick on whatever keyboard, and then they'll say, okay, this keycap is called a burb. It's a bird, but that's the name for it. The burb comes in 20 colors, and we're only going to do a limited run of them. Go. And people will spend the craziest amount of money for these Artisan keycaps. And I mean, again, they're made by artists. They're made by hand. It makes sense, but in other ways, it just does not. I saw this one burb keycap that I just mentioned. It had 3 different colors in it. It was really cool, but it was $300 for a little piece of plastic. And that's not the most expensive one I've seen. usually from the makers, they'll usually sell them between like $30 and $60, and it's mostly just compensating for their time making the cap. And they don't make a ton of a profit. But there are some keycaps where they are just such beautiful, high-quality caps, and they just sell for bucket loads. The most expensive cap I've seen is about $1,000. But man, it's crazy. Artisan keycap collectors are a whole other breed within the mechanical keyboard community. I saw one keyboard the other day that was every single key on it was an Artisan keycap, and that keyboard cost the person over $3,000 to put together all the Artisan caps. It gets deep.
Are they putting these little sculptures on top of existing keys or making the entire key from scratch?
Usually the entire key from scratch. And it definitely depends on the keycap maker. There's one keycap maker that's pretty popular. Her name is Tiny. That's actually her name. And she runs a Twitch stream where she makes Artisan keycaps, and she usually puts it on a keycap, and I forget if it's ABS or PBT. I know, again, it's because of the melting point, whatever plastic she picks. And she just uses clay and makes these beautiful little sculptures on there, and then like bakes it, and then people can buy them from her. And so it's kind of up to the maker whether they want to use a resin keycap and make it all from scratch, or make some kind of clay sculpture on top of an existing cap.
So what kind of sculptures? Because that doesn't sound very comfortable to type by hitting sculptures.
Yeah, and so that's
like the Eiffel Tower or something, you poke your finger.
Yeah, right. That's why most people usually just put it on their escape key, depending on the caps. But I've seen some beautiful ones, and I'll have to send you some later on. But for example, one of them that this one maker, I think they're Keyforge, either Keyforge or just another key maker. Those two are some really big names in that realm. And one of them is just a rose, and it looks just like a little flower that you can type on. And I've seen some people where their keyboard is a garden because it's just all the different rose colors on it, like a green case. And it's really cool looking, but that's just what they type on.
Yeah,
I've seen lions where I'm worried to type on it because it looks teeth could scratch me. There's been different dragons, there's snakes, there's turtles, there's pufferfish, there's a lot of them are animals. I really want to try to make one, and I was thinking I might just make a castle, and we'll see if I can get anywhere, because
a castle,
yeah, I
with the towers pointing upward.
So I am thinking much smaller, and I'm thinking like a rook, like a chess piece rook or something.
Oh, okay.
Just like a tower with like the little bumps on the outside and a cylinder. I'll start basic and maybe work my way up if I get to that point.
Yeah, you could have an entire chessboard that you're typing.
That's what I thought. Well, and I was thinking if you make a whole series of those, you could make like a moat in between the function keys and like the alphas and really get detailed with it. But that gets into a whole other realm of things. One thing that people also do is they'll get the molds for one of these Artisan keycaps, get a plain colored one like white, and then they'll have a miniature painter person who does it for like board games or like what is it called, Warhammer? You know how the people who like those role playing games that are really intense, they will hand paint those small keycaps. And there have been some glorious paintings I've seen on keycaps before, and those keycaps also sell for a very pretty penny because it's just very high quality and done by actual artists. This keyboard world can get really, really deep when people know what they want.
Yeah. So, okay, you were mentioning the different types of plastic and how it reacts to your oils in your hand. Yeah. I see this a lot where you get the space bar, especially, is the one that gets really oily.
Yeah. And
is there anything you can do about that? Like once it gets to that point?
Wash it. I actually have washed it before where sometimes I'll get keyboards from someone and the keycaps will be kind of grimy and stuff, and I just pull all of the keycaps off and just put it in just a big tub of warm water with dish soap, and I just kind of stir it around and wash the caps. And then they're not shiny anymore. That's truly it. It's just like oil buildup. I would say if you really want to avoid it entirely, PBT keycaps are the best to go because they have a texture on them that first of all, is bumpy, so it just doesn't get shiny in general. But the plastic has some kind of magical way of just not getting shiny over time, and I can describe it without using a lot of waving hand motions and and telling you this is just
because reasons.
Yeah, this is how chemistry works, children. It just happens. So. Yeah, I know that PBT plastic is the best for that if you just want to avoid it entirely.
Yeah. See, you use chemistry every day.
Yeah, exactly.
Question. Have you ever used typewriters?
Yes, I have. I think typewriters are super cool. I haven't actually, written something legitimate on a typewriter. I've more just, played with ones at, a Goodwill or actually at the Amazon offices they have one where you can type a poem and leave it for a friend, and so I've played with the typewriters in that sense, and that is where a lot of the feelings that people want out of mechanical keyboards come from, especially with the loud clicky switches and the heavier ones. People want that really intense feeling as they're clacking, and it's nostalgic for a lot of people.
Yeah, when we were mentioning earlier, it's hard to press down on a pinky on some of those key switches. That's how typewriters usually are, is the switch. And what's kind of cool on typewriters is you have an adjuster to adjust how hard you have to press it.
Yeah, which is...
So last time I was in Seattle, or the only time I've been in Seattle, I went to a typewriter store there.
Nice.
So you might want to go check that out. It's pretty cool.
Yeah, I'll have to look it up.
They've got shelves and shelves of typewriters, but they're pretty expensive.
Seattle is really hipster, so I'm sure there's multiple typewriter stores, but I'll have to find one.
Well, there are two right next to each other, but one of them's technically more of a repair shop.
Gotcha. That makes sense. It's probably good business for the both of them to be next to each other.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, that's awesome. I really love just playing with keyboards in general. There's, as you can see, there's a lot of knowledge. And it's truly just exposure. I look at the mechanical keyboard subreddit probably every day, just looking at the different shapes that people have tried, or the different keycaps people have customized, and the different boards people have put together. It's a really fun hobby. It's easy to spend a lot of money if you're not careful. And so as long as you set budgets for yourself and everything, and are willing to trade and sell and stuff, I think it's great. A lot of times if I decide I want to get some kind of keyboard, I'll sell another one to justify it to myself, and it's fun to see the different projects that people have put together for the community to check out.
So with the shapes, with the profiles, are there ever you use one profile in this row and a different profile in a different row? People
do, but I would never. I like feeling uniform across the board. I don't need any of that crazy switching around. People do switch out the colors a lot, though. They'll say, okay, I want the alphas from DSA Royal Navy, and then the mods from DSA Overcast or something, and swap them out, I should say.
Okay.
There's this one keycap set that's based on the Grand Budapest Hotel, and so it's all pink and purple, and it has some red in there, and it's really, really cool. And a lot of people combine it with some other sets. For example, there's SA Chocolatier, which is an SA keycap set, but it's all based on Willy Wonka, and so it has fun novelty keycaps that have the Wonka symbol on them, and they're all brown and chocolatey, and they're a really cool color, and people mix those. There's another set called SA Jukebox, where it's 50s themed, and so it has a lot of turquoise and beige and a deep red and stuff. And so there's all of these really cool sets that can kind of be mixed and matched, and especially if they're the same profile, people love doing that. And one thing that Signature Plastics does, because again they make a lot of these caps, is they run grab bags every month where you can pay X amount of money, and they'll just give you 5 pounds of keycaps just from various sets that they've made and any extras that they have. And it's been so fun getting the grab bags, where myself and a few friends will all get grab bags and have a keycap sorting party together, where we'll sort by profile and color, and I'll say, oh, I'll trade you this one for that one. And we end up making our own custom keycap sets ourselves. And some people, they just put all kinds of crap on their keyboard, and they call it a vomit set because it's rainbow unicorn colors all over the place.
Nice.
Yeah.
So we almost forgot to talk about layers.
Oh yeah, the layers. Onions have layers, and so do keyboards. So when you want to,
I would go with parfait.
Parfaits are delicious. Anyway, when you want to program your keyboard, when you're getting to the software end of it, depending on the electronics beneath, you kind of can have complete free reign over what you want to do. And so I have one friend, for example, where she has a smaller keyboard, a 68% keyboard, and a separate numpad. But her numpad she programmed to just be different macro keys. And when she streams herself doing something on Twitch, she presses one of the keys and suddenly her keyboard layout is more mapped to her Switch setup. Or if she's using Photoshop, she has a key for that, and then all of a sudden it's set up for her keyboard shortcuts that she uses for Photoshop. And there's a lot of people who do that where they'll just have full layers of functionality built into the keyboard that just go as deep as you want to go. And for myself, I usually just have the standard layer of like the alphas, again, letters and numbers and modifiers, and then I'll have a function key where if I do function M, that will mute my computer. Or if the two carets next to M, I usually do function for those two to do volume up and volume down. And then if my keyboard has LEDs underneath, I'll have like function 0 and 9. And when I do those ones, that toggles the LEDs on and off or changes the colors. There's all kinds of different things that you can do both on your keyboard to change its layout and also on your computer to just do something. Some people, they tend to end their emails with the exact same greeting every single time. So they'll do function whatever and it'll just spit out the greeting or the conclusion of whatever email they might be writing. And so it really lets you do whatever you want when you program a keyboard. And again, with a 60% keyboard, because it doesn't have arrows, you can program your arrows to be anything. Some people, they make their arrows just be their function keys on the right and have the shift be up arrow. And then some people have it be the different alphas. Some people, they just use a mouse and don't use arrows at all.
Yeah.
So it's really up to you how you program your keyboard. But the different layers let you kind of, again, map it to whatever you would want it to do.
Yeah. So I think, are there kind of like 3 different types of like function keys? Like one, you have to hold it down.
Right.
To make the layer, and as soon as you let go, the layer's gone. Or one where you hit it and it stays.
Yeah. Until
you hit it again. Or maybe like you hit it once, and then as soon as you hit the next letter, then the layer goes away. They're kind of like sticky keys.
Yeah, and that's accurate, yes. And some examples of that are, for example, caps lock. Caps lock is one where you toggle it and then everything is caps until you untoggle it. And so there's keys like that. And then kind of like control or alt or anything when you have to hold it to do copy. Some function keys are like that where you hold it down and you do whatever you need to, then that's fine. And then there's sticky ones too where you have to do some kind of combination in order to set it off.
Cool. Well, I've used an Ergodox, and all of those types of things are kind of built into it. I didn't know if there was anything else I was missing with it, though, but
that's about right. Yeah, and it's so easy to just dive in deep to keyboards. I haven't even gotten into all the customizations for LEDs and like materials of cases. Like I have this case here that has a layer of acrylic in the middle so lights can shine through, but also is aluminum on top and bottom. I've had wooden cases before and just plain aluminum, plain plastic, all kinds of different
I've heard there are some keyboards that can play music.
Yeah, the Prionic is pre-built, and Prionic is an ortholinear keyboard where it's just a grid of like 5 by 12 or something. And you can program it where it will play music and you can play little songs in there. I haven't done that myself, but I know it's a thing.
Okay, so can you explain your Scrabble keycaps, what they are, how you made them?
Sure. Yeah. So once upon a time, like sometime around this time last year, I had a dream that I was typing on a Scrabble board, like just on a board game. And I was like, huh, that seems fun. And I just like woke up and started designing these keycaps. And it was just a standard keycap where it was like a Q in the middle and then a 10 in the bottom right-hand corner. And all of the different point values and everything. And I thought it was cool, and I was like, okay, I have to do some color corrections to make sure it maps to the right colors to a Scrabble board. And I was really happy with this design after iterating on it a few times, but I realized it would never see the light of day if I didn't have permission to use it. And like I had the Scrabble logo on the enter key, and some function keys had like triple word score and double letter score and stuff. So I just started cold calling Hasbro. And I was just messaging all kinds of people all over the place, saying, okay, do you know anybody who might have worked for Hasbro at one point? Or this person that is like your third connection on LinkedIn, can you introduce me? Just really throwing shots in the dark, trying to contact people at Hasbro. Meanwhile, we had the Seattle Mechanical Keyboard meetup last summer, and I met a couple people at Massdrop, and I said, hey, just so you know, I have this design going. And they said, well, we get lots of designs. And I said, but look, it's Scrabble. And they said, if you can get permission to use that, we'll help you make it real. And so that was like my kick in the pants to be more motivated to make it happen. And finally, I found an account executive who I had even gotten some no's from some people at Hasbro, but I finally found an account executive who was just like, yeah, this sounds awesome. And he did not know much about the world of keyboards, and I could tell he didn't really want to know. He was just like, okay, how much would you sell it for? What's your plan? And so that once I got connected with him, that's when I started talking to Hasbro saying, okay, I have someone who's interested. I need to talk with them about logistics and everything. And I was basically the middleman between Hasbro and Massdrop for a while. And finally in about mid-November, early December, I got a contract signed. And keep in mind, I was getting married at the time. So very hectic. But we finally got a contract signed for a license to be able to produce these keycaps. And I wanted to make a full-on keyboard and completely trick it out with everything. And Massdrop was like, one thing at a time. You don't realize how much work it is for a full keyboard. And they were right. So I ended up again, refining the design a little bit more and had these finalized Scrabble keycaps. And then we partnered with WASD Keyboards, which again, that's where I got my first keyboard. It's very full circle. And they said that they would provide the body, like the switches and electronics and case for a keyboard if we provide the switches. If anybody wanted to buy just a straight keyboard by itself, or if people wanted just the keycaps to stick on their own existing keyboards, they could do that. And yeah, the keyboard eventually went on sale in March, and the sale continued until National Scrabble Day in April. Nice. And it was awesome. We ended up getting all kinds of traction. I had like articles on CNET, and I wrote a blog post that was shared around a lot. And we ended up selling a little over 1,000 keycap sets, which was really exciting to see. And also, I forget the exact number of keyboards, the full keyboard. Mm-hmm. But yeah, we had a bunch of Scrabble enthusiasts who knew nothing about mechanical keyboards asking a lot of questions, and so myself and Massdrop would write posts and everything explaining this is what a mechanical keyboard is, this is why it's cool. By the way, it's Scrabble. And like some professional Scrabble players were just like, oh, well, I have to get this. And so it was fun kind of seeing my worlds of liking board games and mechanical keyboards collide a little bit. And yeah, now the keycaps are all in manufacturing. I actually have some color samples across the house. And yeah, it's in manufacturing, and it's due to ship in August. And that's been the project so far.
Awesome. Yeah, I ordered one, and I can't wait for it to arrive.
Yay! Thanks.
Yeah. And you made it super easy because I'm not really into this world yet, and so I don't know how to like order something for an Ergodox.
Yeah.
But the way you had it set up, it's like, yeah, you just add the Ergodox extra keys on there, and you're good to go. And then I got the novelty keys too, because I wanted those.
Classic, of course. Oh, I'm glad that you got the Ergodox ones. Yeah, those ones, some people are just like, why would you support them? Hardly anybody has an Ergodox. And I'm like, because there's some of us who do.
Yes.
There's dozens of us. And so, Yeah, I'm glad that you got the Ergodox ones. I'm excited to see them.
Yeah, because I've been really sad. I love my Ergodox, but I haven't gotten any good keycaps for it. It's just the standard cheap blank ones that came with
Right.
it.
Yeah, well, and a lot of Ergodox designers or keycap designers that like throw Ergodox in later, they just have blanks for all of the modifier keys, and so you'll have the alphas, but then everything else is just blank. Uh,
Yeah.
Which some people like, some people don't. I chose to offer both, and so that way people could kind of pick and choose.
Yeah. I had to get blanks for the extras because they're all different custom things.
Right. Yes. Figure
Yeah.
if you have a lot of different mappings and custom stuff, that's up.
Yeah. Cool. Well, thanks for coming on. Where can people find you online?
Well, if you look up Cassidy Williams on Google, there's myself and there's a Scooby-Doo character, and I'm not the Scooby-Doo character. So Google me.
The other one, not the Scooby-Doo.
The Scooby-Doo character. Or my username is Cassidy pretty much everywhere. Cassidoo. So you'll find me on Twitter, on GitHub, on LinkedIn, on CodePen. Cassidy. That's where you can find me.
Awesome. Well, thanks so much.
Yeah, thanks so much for having me. It was fun.
Yeah, definitely fun. I learned a lot.
Yay. I'm glad.